welcome back to the Elite Football Show. My name is Haider, and I'm your host as usual today. I've got an absolute stellar cast with me here. I've got Ciaran, Kaus, and Pauly. How are you all doing today?
Pretty good.
All good. Yeah, all good. A lot of stuff going on, so...
It's just blown up, hasn't it? I mean, look, the reason why I wanted to do this show today, guys, is I just wanted to sort of debunk the theory. I think we all did that Ole has no tactics. Now, before anyone goes in and says, oh, he's no Klopp, we know he's not like Klopp. We know he's not like Guardiola. Not many managers are on that level. But what we're going to do here today is we're just going to give more of a tactical breakdown on how he sets up his teams. Because for me, guys, and I'm going to start with you today, Kos, before... We touched on a few transfers, but I just want to say to you that when people say Ole was lucky to get third and that 3 semi-finals was a fluke, what do you say to that?
I mean, it's probably a deluded logic more than anything else, because you could clearly see that he clearly evolved a lot tactically during that injury-stricken period, and when we didn't quite have a number 10, he still kind of adapted and we got pretty good results during that time. And when we got Bruno Fernandes in, and even before that, just after Mourinho left, we could see the sort of imprint that he wants the team to play in. Like, we could technically just get an idea of how let's say he wanted to impose a system in which all of his players were technically pretty good. They wanted to build from the back. They wanted a fluid front three, fluid front four, things like that. You could see that in his very first game. And there were times when we didn't quite have a number 10 and we fell to a point where we had Andreas Pereira being our most creative player in terms of chances created and stuff like that. But still, we managed to get big results. And we got results against Norwich and Brighton. And last season, it wasn't, these teams weren't quite teams that played with a low block. They were more open in their approach, and we beat them, which wasn't a surprise, but we still managed to get big results against big teams. And it shows that even if he, as you said, he's not quite Jurgen Klopp, but he knows how to be flexible with tactics. And when you look at maybe managers like, let's say, Diego Simeone, he tried a lot to vary his system into a much more attacking system last season, but Atletico Madrid clearly underperformed on their XG the most in Europe. And that says a lot about what Ole is. He's much more tactically flexible, let's say if that's the right word, than some managers out there, especially in the Premier League.
Yeah, fantastic points. Yeah, fantastic points. We're going to talk about transfers at the end, guys. So if you've got any transfer questions, Kos, obviously he does freelance, right? He's written for the Times and Manchester Evening News. So if you've got any questions, make sure you put them in near the end. We'll do a little segment at the end. I think we should do it at the end because I want to get through this first. But Ciaran, Kos brings up some fantastic points. I know you've done a little bit of research on how Ole's set up at Molde. Can you just give the listeners an overview of that? You're on mute. There you go.
My bad. So basically the difference I kind of wanted to look at, has anything changed from what we currently see with the United setup to kind of what he introduced at Molde? Because the one thing people will always say is that it's just a Norwegian league and that it shouldn't matter, and that shouldn't be part of his resume. But at the end of the day, Molde weren't one of the powerhouses in the Norwegian league when he took over. So the one thing that I looked at was to see kind of what was the formation he used, what was the yeah, it is, and what was the style that kind of he liked to use when he was playing or when he was managing Molde. So what I looked at was that his 2 main formations that he used was the attacking 4-2-3-1. So what we kind of see at United right now, to a certain extent. Now we see more of a conventional at times 4-3-3, but you often do see this kind of style of formation as well. Often you'll see this when kind of the lineups are announced, the way the United account will kind of tweet it out as that kind of 4-2-3-1. And then also when he played defensively for Molde, he played in a 4-1-4-1. So the one thing that I looked at was what was his style when he played for, or when he was coaching them. So he had three kind of things that he liked. He liked pressing, counter pressing for when they lost the ball, and then fluid attacking play. All three things that we've seen that he's tried to implement when he came in at Manchester United, which was completely different to what we saw under Mourinho. So the first one is, I'll start with the pressing from the front. The one thing that you see is no matter what team that they were playing against, he kind of used the same tactics, whether it was when they played against Rosenborg, who were kind of the favourites the season that Molde won. The league that it kind of started off from the attack. They did the same thing when they played Zenit St. Petersburg in the qualifier for the Champions League, which, if my memory reminds you, there was a lot of goals in that game. I think it was 4-3 or something like that. But the two things that kind of stood out, the first one was that how important the strikers and the wingers were in terms of for the press. And the reason why I say this is because we saw how impressive it was when the likes of Anthony Martial was kind of pressing from the top and winning the ball back early for United in the kind of months prior to the season being over. We saw the same thing in Molde when Haaland was doing it. He would press from the box once the opposition's kind of defenders would have the ball. And what would happen then is you would see the two wingers trying to press the fullbacks, but to try and make them come more infield. So it was basically trying to limit what the opposition could do. What he was trying to get the defense to do is to kind of play a risky pass into the center midfield. So that was kind of the first thing that kind of stood out. It was the first kind of trap that he would set, and it all started with those kind of attacking players, which we do see a lot of kind of United trying to do at the moment. But if you don't have the players that all work together and are working hard to press, it doesn't work as easy, and the defense are able to get out very quickly. Now, what you also see is that the two fullbacks for Molde during that kind of last season would also press very highly and aggressively. Their whole reason for doing that was to try and then allow kind of the center midfielders and the center back that was closest to the ball, they would kind of cover the space. Again, it's something that he's tried to implement from what I've seen for United. And that's kind of like a quick overview of kind of what happened in terms of his pressing tactic while he was at Molde. The second thing that I mentioned there was kind of their counter pressing. Their counter pressing, it's very simple. It's basically that the minute that they would lose the ball, they would have 2, 3, 4 players kind of trying to surround the ball to try and win it back and get it back as quick as possible so that they could have kind of a quick attack and kind of continue that fluid attacking football. Yeah. And so that was the second one. And then the kind of important one, I think, for us, because I think a lot of people, when they talk about Ollie's tactics, are constantly talking about his attacking play. They don't really talk as much about his defensive play, because there are times that you'll see when he was with Molde that he would play deeper and the team would play deeper, trying to get the opposition to kind of come onto them. And really what they tried to do was to force kind of the wingers or the fullbacks to put in bad crosses and to kind of stop it there. And they would kind of compact the midfield, which it makes sense when you hear Solskjaer talk about how we let the wingers or wing backs from the last couple of weeks get easy crosses in and not coming out to block it. So that's one thing that kind of stuck out to me. The last thing that just kind of as the overview is the fluid attacking play. At Molde, they liked to kind of bring the ball out from the back, which we see now at Man United. But what they used to do is they'd split the two centre backs. They'd have one of their midfielders come and play deeper centrally, and they'd have their wing backs kind of bombing up the field.
Like Matic does, doesn't he? Matic was dropping into between the centre backs against Brighton.
Yeah.
And we were trying to see the fullbacks go further forward.
Yeah. Fred does it too.
Yeah,
Fred
exactly.
does it too.
Yeah, exactly. So then what they would have is one of their other central midfielders would kind of come a little bit wider and kind of receive the ball then. And what you would see at that stage is, especially against a pressing side, that they would use the kind of aggressive presses to their advantage, because that midfielder would then look for the fullback that's already bombed up. If that midfielder that's gone up already is being kind of marked by the fullback, then what he used was the wingers either to run in behind or to kind of come more centrally to receive the ball. So that was the first thing. And you see a lot of similarities between that and Man United. The only difference is I don't think the fullbacks do exactly what he wants them to do right now. And it makes sense why maybe he's looking for a more attacking side on the left. We spoke about it earlier. It kind of goes against what he did with Aaron Wan-Bissaka, but again, maybe he thought that he could get more out of him attacking wise. But the other thing that was interesting is that Haaland's role for Molde was to get in behind the defense. We don't see that too often with Anthony Martial. And he's one of those that kind of comes to collect the ball and then tries to get around. It's one of those that kind of needs to, and it makes sense to why he wanted Haaland last January and why we're currently looking for kind of more strikers. The other thing that kind of played into it that I see very kind of similarities between at Molde and now at United was that he did use kind of those inverted wingers to kind of get in behind the space to kind of move on from the fullbacks like we see what Rashford do on Shaw's position. We don't see it too much with Greenwood because he kind of comes in a little bit more, but you see kind of some of the basis of what he used at Molde and used very successfully at Molde and tried to put it in. For me right now, the reason why it's not working in the exact same way as it did, obviously you have to change your tactics a little bit because of the opposition you're playing against now, but also I don't think he has the style of players for the positions that he wants to play. The one thing that I would say is that under his system, you have to be aggressive. It requires high work rate. If somebody isn't giving that, it's going to let the rest of the team down, especially in kind of the counter press or in his defensive press, because while he starts the press with his attacking players, it does require everybody to be working at kind of their jobs. And there are times that you see one or two players that are a little bit off it, and then that creates spaces. And we've seen that the last couple of weeks when the players haven't been as fit as they should be. So the players aren't taking up the correct spaces to come in to cover the players that are pressing. So you do see a lot of similarities between the two. So people saying that he has no tactics is completely false. He does, but you also need the players there to actually do the kind of tactical. Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely, Ciaran, fantastic analysis. I mean, you blew me away there. But I'm going to read out a few comments and then I'll come around to the other guys. But I know Pauly wants to answer on. Hello, Anish. How you doing, mate? For a low block, if the fullbacks who are more attacking are crucial, then what was the point of buying Wan-Bissaka? And why do you think Dalot didn't work under Oli? One second. I'm going to read out two more comments. Rohit, hello, mate. How you doing? Good to see you here. He's talking about the results, thanks injuries and squad depth have diluted the impact of Ollie's good tactics. I think that's a fair point. We will talk about that actually with Pauly about why we were playing a more of a counter-attacking sort of style at the beginning of last season. Rohit also says attacking wingers and fullbacks are super important for Ollie. That fits the focus on Sancho and Tellez. Absolutely. What I will say in terms of Anish's comment, Pauly, is that is a fair comment to say why, when you look at what he wants from the fullbacks, why Wan-Bissaka was signed, when you know that actually probably the area of his game he needed most work was the attacking output. Now, for me, I think Wan-Bissaka is a fantastic player. The other thing I would say in terms of the defense is that we play a high line. So why are the two players you buy in terms of Maguire, Wan-Bissaka, two players that don't actually fit what you want to do? When you're looking at a centre-back pairing, we've spoken this many, many times, but to play that high line and to play if you want the fullbacks bombing forward, you need to have the two central defenders who are A, quick, and two, very good on one-on-one situations. I think you're looking at that pairing now. I would say they're probably the worst out of all our centre-backs in terms of pace and one-on-one situations. So talk to me a little bit about that comment, and also talk to me about why we played a counter-attacking style at the beginning of the season. I think it's quite obvious, but I do want you to break that down for the listeners.
Yeah, so let's forget about Maguire for the time being. Why? That's a fair question. If you want to play that high line, why go after someone that doesn't have pace? Fair question. But Wan-Bissaka does have a lot of pace. So you get someone that can bomb forward and has that recovery space. Now, Wan-Bissaka, like you said, going forward is the weak part of his game. Okay, he's 21. he already is the best at getting back and playing defense. So he's got half of his game just completely locked down, better than everybody else. So now you focus on getting forward, and we know that he was doing extra sessions in the first half of the season to try to improve this. And by all means it did. He did improve. Now, one of the issues he ran into was at the beginning of the season, Dan James was playing on the right wing. And when Dan James played on the right wing, you had someone who was playing as this winger, and he was hugging the touchline, and the two didn't really know how to interact with each other. There were plenty of times where James would give the ball to Wan-Bissaka and then not get out of the way. And now you had one defender who was able to pick up the both of them. There were times where Wan-Bissaka would make the overlapping run and James wouldn't give him the ball. And it all seemed very clunky. And around Boxing Day is when that changed. When Solskjaer started going more towards Mason Greenwood and Juan Mata on the right-hand side, these left footers who like to cut in, like to move around and open up space. And then Rashford got hurt, and that moved James to the left side, and you had Greenwood, Mata on the right, or you moved Wan-Bissaka to that wing-back spot. And forgive me for getting a little bit technical on the numbers here, but by all means, it worked. In the second half of the season, Wan-Bissaka had 4 assists compared to none in the first half. His expected assists went from 0.04 per 90 in the first half to 0.16 in the second half, which is exactly what you want to see out of a 21-year-old. You want to see improvement, and he was steadily improving come after the break. You could go back to that Burnley match in January where we lost 2-0, and the first half, Wan-Bissaka put 3 or 4 brilliant balls right onto his teammates' feet and head, and they just didn't finish. He had 2 assists coming out of lockdown. He had a brilliant assist to Rashford against Bournemouth that was called back for offside. So he was learning the role that he was doing. Why didn't Ollie go with Diogo Dalot? Because Diogo Dalot proved to be pretty bad. I think we overrated Diogo Dalot a bit because when he came in that first year, we were so excited to see someone that wasn't Valencia or Young.
Darmian, man.
Yeah. And all of a sudden it was like, oh my God, this guy's incredible. And in fact, he really wasn't. And he's really bad. So Solskjaer just couldn't trust him.
Pauly, can you answer this question here? So do you think Ollie prefers to attack through the middle? That's why we have not seen the fullbacks go up the field more often. They prefer to attack through Rashford and Greenwood coming inside. Thank you very much for the comment. I reach out, Mustafi. Thank you very much for getting. And guys, make sure you hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. We're hopefully going to get Coast once a month. If this goes really well and you guys are enjoying it, we're not just going to do United. We're going to do a bit of Bielsa because Coast loves Bielsa. We'll do Chelsea because Lampard has no tactics. And we'll do so many other managers and teams. You guys just need to drop in the comments, but hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, give everyone a follow as well. And we want to hear more of your comments, some great questions. But Pauly, yeah, I'm going to chuck this question to you, then I'm going to move on to Coast because we've got a couple of questions for you as well.
Yeah, he does. His best players are all up the middle. That's the thing. Like Liverpool don't have, Liverpool, they have their front three, then their midfield are more defensive players, which is why Klopp put the onus of attacking onto his fullbacks and said, you guys are going to basically be wide number 10s, get forward. United's best players are in the middle. And even Rashford and Greenwood, when they play wide, they're trying to get into the middle. So in order to do that, you need to go wide first. And I think that's where United are struggling. The whole notion that Wan-Bissaka can't attack and he's useless in the fight. Wan-Bissaka is very good in the defensive third. He's very good in his own half of the pitch. He's very good in the final third. He's not good in the buildup. That's where he really needs to improve. And that's where United are really struggling because of the fact you need to go wide in order to come back in. Otherwise, teams just pack the middle and you see how we struggle. It happened against Brighton because I think everybody was discombobulated against Brighton. Everybody's still off the pace a bit, but it's happened. You see it happen when Williams plays out on the left. We go wide out to the left and Williams takes a touch with his right foot and immediately looks back into the middle. I wanted to just answer that question that you said about the why we started with a counterattack at the beginning of last season. And it really just comes down to, what do you define as a counterattack? Is it something where you're sitting back and letting your opponents come at you and then you're going to try to run the full length of the field against them? Because if that's what it was, we didn't do that. Like, we did it against Manchester City and we did it against Chelsea, and that was basically it. If it's just whenever you get control of the ball, you go on the attack. That was what Ollie wanted to do at all times. He would always talk about that. Be bold on the ball. As soon as you win the ball, look to make something happen with it. And, you know, some teams we were good with that. You know, that's how we scored against Liverpool in the game that we should have won 1-0, but we won, but it was a 1-1 draw. We did that against Brighton and against Norwich. Then there were games where we won the ball back, and then we held on to it for a split second. And that split second is just enough for opposing teams to reset themselves and make it difficult to break them down. And that, you know, that was Newcastle and Bournemouth, where just taking a second between
too many Pauly.
Yeah. All of a sudden it all goes away. But I don't think his goal wasn't to sit back and counterattack and invite the pressure on. That's what Mourinho did. He looked at his team and he said, our defense is a little shaky. So instead of inviting pressure on the defense, let's defend higher up the pitch. And as soon as we win the ball, let's go. It didn't work out that way.
Yeah, fantastic points. Guys, I'm going to read a few comments out. Thank you so much. Look, guys, there's so many comments. I'm trying to get through all of them. Some great questions here, which I want to send over to Carlos. But that's fantastic analysis, Pauly. I can't really disagree with that. Rohit said something funny here. I want to see you guys have Runs and Saeed on your show, discuss tactics. I don't think they'll be able to, mate. I don't think that's their forte. But what I will read out a few more here. Morton Malik, hello mate. He says, 1, Ollie likes playing a high line, so why did he sign Maguire? That's the question I have. I mean, if I'm being honest with you, I think Lindelof isn't as bad as people think he is, and I think I think Lindelof's a better footballer, but there's too many deficiencies in his game, etc. under the high ball. And with Maguire, you make him captain, and unfortunately now you can't bench an £80 million captain player. There was much better value for money out there in the market. I think that was a mistake, but he's our captain. You got to support him. But you said here, Ollie likes Matic dropping back between the centre backs. This means fullbacks playing wide. They need to be good on the ball. So why buy Wan-Bissaka? Look, with Wan-Bissaka, I think he's getting a lot of hate. People forget how good he was in the beginning of the season. And when you don't have, as Pauly said, a proper right winger in front of him until Greenwood. But again, Greenwood doesn't hug the touchline. I expect when Sancho, hopefully, fingers crossed, if he comes in, I expect him to be a lot more sort of hugging the touchline, providing more width, which will help Wan-Bissaka immensely. A lot of the times you saw Wan-Bissaka actually being the only person furthest forward on the right. And that's a problem because he's not good enough to do that. So the United are one-sided. But I'm going to pass some questions over to you, Carlos, but here's one here. So, Ninad, hello, mate. Hey, guys, question to everyone here. So this is you, Carlos. Do you think we can rely on Fred in a single pivot in the long term as part of the midfield three? Talk to me, Carlos, about the midfield, because obviously we, as Pauly said, we could only play on the counter and we had Pereira and Lingard, but United massively upgraded it, and Fred was one of United's better players. Now, Fred's a funny one because I think a lot of people like his energy and tenacity, which I do as well, but he's not quite good enough on the ball as a number 8, I don't think. I think defensively, his awareness isn't on the level of Matic's, but not many people are. Where do you think Fred plays best? Can he play in that single pivot? And talk to me about United's evolution in midfield, because I think that's very key to how United played during the restart. And I want you to talk to me more about the tactical sort of basis for Ollie's team after restart, because we were the best team in the league by a long way.
Well, to be fair, I think neither of Scott McTominay or Fred are meant for that single pivot role, because in a sense that if you look at the sort of player that Nemanja Matic has been over the years, even at Chelsea or even at Benfica, he was often more box to box, in the sense that he would get involved in tackles a lot more than he does right now or under Mourinho and Conte later on. But as time passed on, he became more of a sitting midfielder who would break down opposition passing lanes, would often carry the ball past their, let's say, opposition midfield lines and stuff like that. But for a player like Fred, I think at Shakhtar, Fred was a player who wasn't exactly a defensive midfielder there. He was never a defensive midfielder there. Back in Brazil, he often played on the right wing. So he's clearly someone who likes to use his body more often than people think. In the sense, he wants to get involved in tackles more. He wants to put his body on the line, because you can see that he's got a pretty diminutive figure, unlike, let's say, Matic. He's someone who wants to use all of his energy in winning the ball back. Last season, I think he was dribbled past, second most number of times in the Premier League. but he also won the similar amount of tackles per game of tackles per 90 minutes as well. It shows that he just thrives on being a player who wins the ball back. And when he played as the sole defensive midfielder or in a single pivot against Copenhagen, he sometimes looked like he couldn't quite pick out the right passes, even when Bruno Fernandes was dropping in to create some extra passing lanes and come in as an extra passing option. He gave the ball away twice when Matic could have done the job much, much better. He could have played a wide player in, could have played Fernandes in. So I think for the Scotland national team, McTominay has been used as a third centre back a lot of times. I mean, by a lot of times, I mean because he's played about 16, 17 games for them. And that's because Scotland have got centre backs in Scott McKenna and Kieran Tierney who are not exactly great in the air, or they're not exactly bruisers. So I think this is an option that we can probably look at in maybe this season, or if Ole stays, we can probably look at it next season, because Mourinho did try it twice last season when we played Southampton, and he did praise McTominay as well after we managed to draw 2-2 against them. And McTominay possesses this sort of main streak about him, and if we decide to play a player like Scott McTominay as a defensive midfielder or as in a single pivot, I think we take away a lot of good things that he has in his game. Like, he's probably best at ramming people down, probably just killing them with the sort of physique that he has. It's. I mean, I've seen a lot of times that when he tries to play the Matic role, he doesn't really have this natural instinct of when to drop deep into a third centre back role and do the same stuff that Matic does, because he's not quite as good technically on the ball as maybe Matic is. And I think you talked about the way midfield has evolved. I think we all probably know this, that Bruno probably just revolutionized everything. Like, he tried Andreas Pereira there a lot of times, but to me, Pereira isn't quite a proper number 10. I mean, he can be a 10 if he goes to Lazio, which he is going, because Luis Alberto gets a lot of time on the ball there. I mean, that's no disrespect to Serie A, but the thing is that every single time whenever Pereira played, I thought he's just taking a lot more time on the ball than we want, or maybe taking some extra touches that he should not be taking in the Premier League. He is someone who would probably thrive with having more time and space on the ball. And I think Serie A is a place where he would really benefit with regard to the sort of strength that he has.
Yeah, completely agree on that.
Yes, I mean, as far as Pogba is concerned, I mean, it's still pretty complicated when it comes to Pogba, because there are times when he just tangles himself up, especially when we are trying to attack, but teams are pressing us high up the pitch, or if teams just basically want to attack. He takes this extra touch when he shouldn't take an extra touch. He tries to go past people, and maybe someone like Thomas Partey, when he probably thinks he's pretty good as he's probably someone who just wants to break opposition's lines down with his progressive dribbling ability. He got that in him, but I don't quite see him using that sort of. I can't quite put a finger on it, but Thomas Partey. When I look at Thomas Partey, I feel if he plays instead of Paul Pogba when we're playing a low block, or like we played against Brighton this past weekend, I think a player like Thomas Partey would have done a lot to us as compared to Pogba. So I think that's the sort of role Fred has to play in when we get pressed high at the pitch, or at least if Pogba's sort of taking those extra touches when he doesn't need to touch the ball as much as he is. Because against Brighton, I saw he was constantly trying to progress the ball up high up the pitch while maybe playing in a pointless trick or something, doing a 360 or something. It wasn't quite working out, and it wasn't working out against Southampton either last season. So I think that the sort of job that Fred might have to do if we're not the midfielder in maybe in January or next summer, which I think we'll probably get another midfielder next summer. So I think the sort of dilemma we're coming across. In the last game, we saw Fred coming on in the second half. That was about 20 or 30 minutes when we had 20 or 30 minutes left. And that was probably a reflection of what I'm just saying, that there are times when you can't quite rely on Pogba 100% when we are being pressed high at the pitch, or when teams are looking to get a goal if we are 2-1 up and they are looking to attack. So yeah, I think there's still a lot of dilemma in there, but as we've already talked about, like, we need the right sort of players, the players with the right sort of profile to get over all these dilemmas.
Yeah, fantastic points. I'm going to read some comments out. And that's the thing. But I think the positive is United actually have options out, don't they, Carson? And that's what United haven't had for a while. They've got different players in the squads. And this, when people say, oh, we should get rid of, sort of McTominay or Fred, I think it's good to have these different qualities in the squad.
But where do you use them, though? But where do you use if we're saying that Fred can't be that Matic player, and certainly McTominay can't. We saw that against Crystal Palace. And nobody really adequately replaces Paul Pogba, and we had a half a season without Bruno Fernandes to know that nobody in the squad could do that. Maybe Donny van de Beek can, but where else do you play them then? Because as bad as Pogba did on Saturday, and he did absolutely nothing. When he left the game, we had 50% of the possession. And from when he left until we switched to a back three and brought on Bailly, we had 46.4% of the possession. So it went down not by much. And then when Bailly came on till the end, we had less than 40%. So as bad as Pogba was, like, he was doing something when he was in the game, because we were keeping possession of the ball better than we were when anybody else was out there.
Well, the thing is, it completely depends. I mean, look, my thing with the midfield is I still don't think the balance is right. I know we had a fantastic sort of restart period, but I just still don't think that Pogba sitting so deep works for me. I think you're completely negating what he can actually offer to you. What did Pogba do best? And I'll come to you, Pauly, then I'll come to Ciaran after. But what did Pogba do best when Oli first came in? He was playing on the edge of the box more. Obviously, Bruno's further forward, but when I spoke to a lot of Portuguese journalists, especially one in particular, he said Bruno Fernandes is an 8. So Bruno playing as a 10, yes, he's getting involved in the game. And Pogba's not a 10 either. But then there's that idea, isn't it, that, okay, well, then how do we play with 2 8s, essentially, is what the fans want. Well, you've got to have a more mobile, I think, you've got to have a more mobile defensive midfield. And there's a comment here saying here that, if I can find it, from Ninad, saying, I feel a single pivot player needs to do 2 things: be an efficient screener of the defense and be intelligent on the ball, and 2, be very disciplined in positioning too. Conrad Lima is obviously a fan. You're a fan of him, because he's been speaking for 2-3 months, and you always bang the Conrad Lima drum. But Pauly, that's the situation, isn't it? We all really like Matic, but if United wanted to play Pogba further forward, because I agree, a lot of factors came into how Pogba played against Brighton, but essentially Pogba has it in him to be very sloppy on the ball in dangerous positions, especially when teams press. Now, I spoke to someone who said to me that Oli still doesn't trust Pogba, which I think is crazy. But is there that thought that actually, until United fix the defensive midfielder position, someone with a bit more energy there, because Matic is brilliant, but he's not good enough. If you're saying Fred and McTominay aren't good enough, then surely then United they will not step forward until they go and actually bring in that midfielder who, 1, can pass the ball well, and 2, has the energy. And for me, you can't really look for more further forward than Dennis Zakaria. I mean, Rohit here says that Sangare, but look, I spoke to Jeremy Smith, a French journalist. He said to me that Sangare is one of those players who everyone talks about, but no one actually knows how good he is. And he's just one of those players that gets linked every summer. I just think Sangare is one of those players, like, I haven't seen him enough play, so maybe other people can give us an idea. But he's just one of those players where we need to be very careful who we're going to buy, basically. I just don't think we should be throwing names out like that. But, Pauly, talk to me about the defensive midfielder position, because I think that's still a problem. And if you bring someone more mobile in there, I think the 2 behind will look a lot better.
Yeah. Where was Pogba at his best when Oli came forward? He was playing as the 10. He was kind of this free 10 in a 4-2-3-1 that Bruno is playing now. A lot of people like to say it was a 4-3-3, but out of possession, it was always Herrera sitting much more flatter with Matic and Pogba sitting further ahead of them. Yes, he would veer off to the left a lot, but he had he would pop up on the right. He would all that stuff. And that's where Solskjaer said when they were on that great run, he said, we want Paul to be getting in the box, making runs into the box, popping into the box. And he was so good there. Against Tottenham, Gary Neville on commentary for Sky Sports was like, I don't understand why you would give him any defensive responsibilities right now. He is just so good getting forward. But then Herrera got hurt and Matic got hurt. And when United put him further forward, they couldn't get the ball to him. When they dropped him deeper, they couldn't get the ball. And he would progress the ball. There was nobody there to get it. He was progressing it to a whole bunch of crap. Because Martial was hobbled. Lukaku couldn't really play the system. Rashford was hurt. Lingard was hurt. So you're right. You play him deep. He can play in this deep role. He was fantastic last year, especially after the restart. He played such a simple game, and he was fantastic. He played deep in Mourinho's first season. He was fantastic as a deep line playmaker. But you're right. It just feels like you can get so much more out of him.
That's the thing, isn't it? That's my thing. I think what I liked most, sorry, Pauly, and I'll come to you, Carlos, after Pauly gives his answer, but United, I think Pogba played his best football straight after the restart, playing that deep role. He kept it so simple, the basics. My biggest thing with this United side, and this is where people question, is it the coaching? But I don't think this United side does the basics well enough. And that's my biggest problem. We have some very talented players out there, but the basics aren't done well enough. And that's why when me and Pauly, we were talking, obviously, during the game against Brighton, and I said, look, the basics aren't being done. Now, whether that's a fitness issue or not, that's another question, but you got to do the basics. And a lot of times United haven't done the basics well, but onto Pogba, he did do the basics very well after the restart. And I thought, okay, this is a position for him, but he is wasted, isn't he, sitting so deep?
He is. And it's hard because part of the reason that he could do the basics is because you have somebody like Bruno Fernandes there. So when Pogba gets the ball and the defense knows, we saw it on All or Nothing, the Tottenham documentary, that Mourinho said at halftime, Pogba's going to come on. He's going to have the vision to make this pass. And when everyone knows that and they respect that, then he could just sit around and make the basic pass to Bruno and let Bruno make the fantastic pass, because Bruno's already more open because the defense was focusing on Pogba. But you're right. They both seem like to be 2 8.5s. Bruno is more on the 8.5 of that, and Pogba is more on the 10.5. But they're both somewhere in between. The difference, I think, is that Pogba is better defensively around his own box, and that's why. And then as making that initial pass to spring a break, Pogba's better on that, and that's why Ollie wants him deeper. Bruno is, better at defending from the front. But once that initial pass has been made, Pogba is better at making the runs into the box, and Bruno is better at facilitating from the middle of the pitch. And I think we saw that against Crystal Palace. A lot of times Pogba was pushed much higher up the pitch. Bruno was dropping back next to McTominay. They just struggled to get him the ball. It wasn't anybody's fault in particular. Everybody was having a bad game on an individual basis. But out of possession, you then would see Pogba dropping all the way back and Bruno pushing all the way up. And then United would get the ball and Bruno would have to come all the way back to get it. And you're trying to get the players defensively where they're best and in the attack where they're best, but it just makes them both run such an extra amount that it seems like you need to figure out a way. All right, what is overall best? Is it overall best for Pogba to be further up the pitch and Bruno to be back and we lose a little something defensively? Or are we overall at our best with Pogba being back, Bruno being up the top, and Pogba only sporadically making those runs into the box? Otherwise, you're going to wear them both out.
Yeah, fantastic points. I'm going to read out a comment. I'm going to come to you, Kieran. Then I'm going to come to you after Coast. But Satya Kieran, thank you for your comment. Don't you think our centre-back pairing is the main issue here? If we have a better centre-back over Lindelof, Pogba can venture forward more rather than sitting back. I definitely think it's a centre-back problem. I honestly think that if you had an Upamecano behind you, Ollie would definitely give Pogba more freedom. But he just knows that. And also, when you got Matic sitting there, that sort of three players there are they're probably the slowest. They're slowest in the team.
Everybody's looking at the defensive issues. I think the defensive issues in the more immediate term are solved by getting a defensive midfielder rather than spending a lot of money on a center back, especially when you have Twanzebe and Mengi coming up. You may not need
another one if you
get that. If you get that screen in front of them, that solves a lot of problems. And then maybe you don't even need to spend a lot of money on a center back because one of them steps up in a year.
Yeah, absolutely. Ciaran, I want to ask you about the tactical formation tweak, and then Carlos will come to you with quite a big question. But so this tactical formation or tweak that we've seen this year is we've gone to a more of a 4-3-3, I would say. Look, fitness is a big sort of factor in it, but what is Ollie not doing, or what is he not doing well? Because it's not working really at the moment. It's not fluid enough, but what does he need to do to make it more fluid? Because I know it's a tweak to the system, and I know Man City lost 5-2, but when you look at it, United look like 11 strangers both games on the pitch. And for me, that's what I was complaining about. I'm not Ollie out, just to put it so that people in the comments don't say I'm Ollie out. But what I have a problem with, Pauly's probably going to start writing some comments under his second account.
His burner account.
Yeah, his burner account. Haider, Ollie out. No. What my issue is that you're looking at teams with lesser players, I would say, a Bielsa, and I want to come to Costa about Bielsa and, this idea. You see teams with lesser, managers with lesser players getting much more out of it, getting more out of more average players. United are littered with quality in that team, whether you agree with it or not. Maybe not in the defensive areas, but in that midfield and that attack, littered with quality. And for them to be going out there, fitness or no fitness, you don't look that bad, do you? So what is he not doing correctly? Because we did say to each other a few times during the game against Brighton, what are the tactics here? And this is why we've done this show, because people are jumping on that idea he has no tactics. We've obviously proven in the first 40 minutes he has got tactics, but there does need to be more work done on the pitch, because you sometimes wonder what's going on the training pitch.
Yeah, for me, it's not so much that there's a big difference between, in terms of tactically, what he's doing this year to last year, or not even last year, a couple of weeks ago. You can say to a certain amount there is a sense of not fatigue, but there is kind of where players aren't match ready. They're fit, but they're not match fit. So they're not ready to go through a 90 minutes at the level that they should be at. So you can see that, because you can see some of the players. I noticed it in kind of the last game, is every time you saw, I think I mentioned it was either about Shaw or about Rashford, that every single time they made a sprint, they looked like they were knackered after making that sprint. But then a couple of minutes later, they're doing the same thing. So obviously they're not. So that was one thing. But where I have questions about sometimes with Ollie tactically is when plan A is not working and it takes too long for plan B to kind of set in. It's not so much with substitutions. It's about, it takes time for him to actually change things in terms of what's happening on the pitch. He's happy to kind of let it play out and hope that something changes instead of them actually kind of actively trying to change something. And it's one thing that infuriates me a little bit. Now, you'll know, because I say it all the time, is that I've always been one to give Ollie the time needed, because this isn't just a 1 or 2 year plan. He's trying to set up this club to kind of succeed long term. And I've always, just to go back and kind of what we were saying about kind of Pogba and Bruno, for me, Pogba, he's not going to be that player that you're going to see him going up and back, up and back. He's not that kind of box-to-box midfielder, because he likes to attack. And when he's in his defensive position, he's fine and he's good. But you see him when he's trying to chase back. It's not like kind of when we are used to seeing the likes of Roy Keane or Paul Scholes running back and trying to help out the defense. It's the reason why so many people say that Matic needs to play, because we need balance in that midfield. For me, and I don't care who says it, that Bruno was brought in to replace Paul Pogba. Now, there were so many questions asked, can they play together? In an attacking sense, yeah, they can play together, because quality players can usually play together for the most part. But anybody thinking that Bruno was coming in to play alongside Pogba is kidding themselves, because the idea was that Pogba was going to leave. And probably... So
is Van der Beek Pogba's replacement? Because that's what I've been thinking, that Pogba goes next summer, Van der Beek comes in, and Bruno drops back.
Possibly. I thought when it came to the summer that Jack Grealish was to come in for Paul Pogba. And I still think that something like that's going to happen, that more kind of attacking 10 type player is going to come in. Bruno's going to be pushed back. And bringing in Van de Beek is one that you can have a player that can play kind of all three positions. Now, he's not the ideal defensive midfielder, but if you're chasing down a goal and you need to score, there's no reason why he can't play. But like I said, like the guy said, what United need to do is they do need to shore up more defensive midfielder. Of course, the centre-back partnership is a worry because when we're trying to attack teams, like I said before, Ollie likes to attack with free-flowing attacking football, which includes kind of Pogba, Bruno, Martial, Rashford, and Greenwood. So if you're leaving Matic by himself and he gets passed by, then you're leaving Lindelof and Maguire, because normally Shaw and Aaron Wan-Bissaka are pretty far up as well. So you're leaving Maguire and Lindelof basically doing one-on-one defending. And I've said it all the time, they are not good one-on-one defenders.
But Ciaran, that's on Ollie's selection.
Well, it's on Ollie, but it's also on it comes from the top as well, because I think it's very obvious that he's stuck in a position to where he has too many centre backs at the club, and that the club are not going to bring in any more until some of them leave. Now, he has players in that squad. I've said it before. Axel Tuanzebe is probably the best one-on-one defender in terms of his raw ability. The problem is he was coming through and then got a bad injury before we played. I think it was either Liverpool or Arsenal. I think it was the Liverpool game. The plan was for Axel and probably Maguire to kind of be the partnership, because when Maguire would get done for pace, that's something that Axel's very good at. He has great athleticism. So the problem is we have such an off balance in the team that when you see the levels of one or two players drop, you see the big difference in the performance. What we saw towards the end, or even after lockdown, is for those first few games, everybody's levels were at the height of it and everybody was playing excellent football. But then as players tired, you saw with Bruno, you saw with Pogba, you saw with Rashford, their levels slowly started to drop, and we saw us leaking more goals. We saw us not being as fluid in the attack. What we were looking for was there was the likes of Martial, Greenwood, who were still playing really well in the attacking sense. So, like I said earlier, is that the way he plays, it asks a lot out of the team. And if everybody can't reach that kind of high level, and it's worrying that early on in the season that can't happen. Obviously, look, I understand that a lot of these players really have had probably a week off with the internationals, and it's going to feel like one long season. But that makes it even more important that there should be investment into the squad, because we're going to need a big squad for the season in order for us to kind of play the way that Ollie wants us to play.
Yeah, fantastic analysis. Carl, so I'm going to come to you. A two-part question. I can't remember who wrote it. They wrote it 2 or 3 times, so I'm going to say it. But the question was, which striker on the market would be best for Ollie's system? I'm going to take Haaland out of the equation because we know he was his perfect striker, and obviously Ciaran alluded to it at the beginning. But one thing I want to ask, playing devil's advocate, and I've said this before, and I'll openly say it again, Paulie's going to get so surprised when he hears this. No, he's not. But what I'm going to say is that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is a manager who takes us from A to B. We were in a very, very difficult position when he came in. 7 years of very bad commercial decisions, player decisions, you name it, footballing, non-footballing men in footballing positions. It's a mess. So Ole had to come in and change the culture, which he's done fantastically well. People that can't see the work he's done behind the scenes have an agenda, and I'll say that louder for the people at the back. But what I will say is that I have doubts whether he can take us from B to C. And what I mean by that, I mean, can he take us to titles? Can he take us to Champions League far in the latter stages of the Champions League? And can he really, really mix it with the best of the managers, the Klopps, the Guardiolas, the Bielsas? I know Bielsa's at Leeds, but you know what I'm saying? For a prolonged 38-game season, I have doubts about that. Now, I want to ask you, do you think he has the ability to win a league title at United if everything was, the perfect environment, if he had the players he wanted, if everything just was laid out and he had the resources to do that? Because I don't think so, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, to be fair, I know he's going to get all the sources, all the players that he's going to so like Pochettino, who changes the culture of the club, but he still somewhat needs players who fit his system, players who can press high up the pitch, players who can do double training sessions. Because at Spurs, we had players like Andros Townsend, Danny Rose, and Aaron Lennon falling out with it, and then they left Spurs to join clubs like Burnley, Everton, and all these smaller clubs. But if you look at a manager like maybe Massimiliano Allegri, he's someone who gets the best out of the players that he has without quite having one specific system for it. Because I've heard a lot of people say that Allegri is pretty pragmatic, or maybe Zidane is too pragmatic. But these are the sort of managers, or even this applies for Carlo Ancelotti as well, that these managers aren't quite pragmatic. These are the sort of managers who will get bored of players, will make sure that these players play at their best, in the sense that they won't stick to what Guardiola does or what Jurgen Klopp does. They won't stick to a specific shape. They'll vary their system on the basis of their players, or on the basis of the strengths of their players. Now, United are in a situation where it's not guaranteed that we're going to get resources all the times. We are not guaranteed that we'll get every single player that we want, like maybe Man City can, because they are obviously a much better run club than us. And we're not Liverpool, because I think Liverpool are probably one of the best run clubs in the world, or maybe just in England now or in Europe. These are the sort of clubs that can get you the players you want, and you can't quite do that. So the point of having a manager who needs specific players for his system to thrive on, as I mentioned, like a manager like Pochettino and the else that players like managers like Simeone come. These are the sort of managers that might not work out for United in the long term, unless we give them, let's say, 5 or 6 seasons to constantly coach their players into that one system. If Simeone is at United and we give him 5 years, he's going to win us something, because over a period of time, the players will get used to playing that sort of a system. And I look at Ole, and I've seen signs of both the things, to be fair. Because as I said previously, that there have been times when he's not got the players that he needed. There were a lot of injuries, especially in the first few months when he came in. There were times when he couldn't quite get his system in place properly due to a lot of different reasons: suspensions, injuries, not having the players that he needs. But he still somewhat got us respective amount of results. Even last season we saw it. It wasn't quite the best every single time. We lost games that were pretty depressing, especially the Burnley game. It was pretty clear that even he somewhat needs a specific sort of players, a specific group of players. And we've talked about it all this while. I mean, the last 50 minutes have been just about the sort of player that he needs. But if you have a manager like Massimiliano Allegri, I'm a huge Massimiliano Allegri.
Yeah, me too. I think
That's
it's quality.
just because it's quite. He won't go fighting with the ball like Antonio Conte or Mourinho. So he'll get this core of players and he'll be happy with it. And he'll just make sure that he gets the best out of their strengths from the system that he implements. Because at Juventus, he played a lot of different systems in the 3 or 4 years that he was in. But there wasn't exactly one specific style. I know people keep on banging this drum that he used a 3-5-2 and he was pretty pragmatic. He wasn't quite as pragmatic as Mourinho was. And people compare him to Mourinho for some reason. He's never been that pragmatic. So I think a lot of Ole's success depends on what sort of manager he is. Because we've seen flashes of him being a bit of both, but I'm still on the side of him being more in the, let's say, the Pochettino more, where he wants his own players. And the way we run, I'm not sure we'll get sort of those players if we need, unless, as I said, unless we do something like Atletico Madrid have keep a manager with the same system in charge for 7 years, 6 years, 5 years, because there's this period in football in which you need constant change, and Pochettino was Pochettino suffered a lot from it, where there was staleness settling into his players, and his team needed freshness, and the board couldn't quite give a damn about it, and they just sacked him because the relationship completely broke down. I think there will come a point in time where the same thing's going to happen, because, as I said, I'm still in the of Ole being the man who needs a specific sort of player, and he's not like.
Hold on, Carlos. I think we lost you there for a second. But no, that's a fantastic thing. Last point, I want to push over to Pauly for the last word. I mean, Carlos makes some absolutely fantastic points there, which actually I haven't thought about in as much depth. But he talks about the idea of managers who can work with what they've got, and then managers who are also who are system managers, who needs a specific type of player. I mean, United have to think about that very carefully, and obviously they've chosen manager from manager to manager. But looking at Ole, I think he probably is one of those who needs a specific type of player. If United decide, and there's people saying to sack him, which is crazy, and the reason why I'm not in favor of that is because we're, like you said, we're 2 years into a 3-year plan. It's just second season, sorry, and what can you do with the players that he's got? If he's not got the players that he wants, then there's nothing he can do any better than what he's doing at the moment. And those saying to sack, we know, as Cole said, with this board, they're not going to go and give you all the players you want at every single phase of the rebuild. So this idea of system, or I guess a manager that gets the best of what he's got. I mean, do you think that's something that applies to Man United in terms of Ole and in terms of who they're going to bring in next?
I think it's both. I think he does get the best out of what he's got. I mean, look at the seasons that players had. Fred was night and day between his first year and last year. Rashford, Martial had the best years of their careers. Greenwood scored 18 goals coming out of nowhere. McTominay was a much better player last year than he was 2 years ago. Matic, we all thought Matic was cooked and done when Mourinho got sacked, and all of a sudden Matic comes back into the team, has a bit of a revival. He's playing every day. His legs give out again, and at the end of the year, he looked like nothing. In the preseason, he looked shot and dead again when he came on against West Ham and Leicester early in the season, and then just disappeared for like 2 months with an injury that the club have still yet to confirm. Or tell us what it was. It looked like Matic was on his way out in January, and then Matic has now become the key to this team. So is he getting the best out of the team? Yes. Is he a system? He needs certain players to make his system work the best, but he is able to mix it around. I mean, he came in, took a look at the squad, said, this is how I want to play. These are the 11 guys that are gonna help me play there. And he tinkered a little. At first, he put Pereira in one day. He dropped Lingard, and it just never worked outside of his top 11, and that's where he went. And then he got injuries and figured out, okay, so like I got to put Lukaku in. How can I get the best out of this team when Lingard is hurt and Lukaku has to come? And he went out and he beat PSG with a completely different team. He went out and got a 0-0 draw against Liverpool, playing a completely different style of play than he had been doing in the whole lead up. His match against Tottenham, that 1-0 win, he basically played Mourinho ball. He put a diamond in midfield. The team like sat back and absorbed all the pressure, and it looked exactly like what Mourinho did. And then year 2 comes around and he says, right, this is my ideal want of how I'm going to play. I'm only getting 3 players in. So what are we doing? Remember, he wanted to bring in Sean Longstaff. So the odds are he wanted Longstaff to replace Ander Herrera, and it was likely going to be your defensive midfielder, Sean Longstaff, and Pogba playing slightly ahead of them. That didn't happen.
I'm so happy that didn't happen. I'm so happy. I'm sorry. That would have been bad.
Yes. That didn't happen. So he moves Pogba back, and it's okay. Pereira and Lingard are gonna go in there. But then he also goes, maybe Rashford's not the one to play. He moves Rashford out wide. He puts Martial back in the middle. So, and when Pogba goes down, he keeps tinkering to figure out how to get the best out of this team. And he changed his system. The overall basis of the system is this 4-2-3-1 with a high press and try to get him on the counter and try to, as soon as you win the ball back, try to score. But the intricacies, the little things that he did, he had changed that up several times last season. Like you look at how he played against Liverpool, where he switched to a back three and pushed his fullbacks up sky high so that Alexander-Arnold and Robertson couldn't get forward down the pitch. We occupied them all the way up the field so that Liverpool's best creators couldn't get near the box. And it was only at the very end we gave Robertson one chance and he made us pay. So he was making these little tinks all throughout the season. So I think he has this idea of how he wants to play. And like every manager, you have an idea and you just need the right players to fit that in. So when you give him the right players, I think they'll really take off. But when he doesn't have the right players, he's not like, oh crap, what do we do? He figures out a way to tinker with it and make it so that it works. Like we didn't press teams nearly as much in the second half of the year last year. We just don't, he's like, we don't have the stamina to do that. There's always a constant little tink to try to figure out how to get the best out of this team.
Yeah, fantastic points. And look, that's the thing. If anyone's saying he doesn't have tactics, there's so many examples, different types. He's versatile. That's what I will give him. Our team is versatile. We can play 3 at the back. We've shown that we can play 4-3-3, 4-2-3-1. There's so much versatility. We can press. We can sit deep. We can go at pace from the break, counter-attacking on the break. There's things that we can do. I think, Ciaran, last point. I'm going to give you a minute. But what I will say is that what I do sometimes struggle with is that when you see Klopp's Liverpool go out, you know exactly how they're going to play. You see Guardiola's City out, you know exactly how they're going to play. Even when Brendan Rodgers is Leicester, you know how they're going to play. Bielsa's side, you know how they're going to play. There's an identity, and I'm still struggling to see what that identity is on a regular basis. It's great being versatile, but what is Ollie Ball essentially?
I think we're not going to find out until he has the players that he wants to suit those positions. You look at it, I don't think he has the left back he wants. I don't think he has the defensive midfielder he wants. He doesn't have the right winger he wants. And really, even though I think Martial played excellent, I don't think he has the style of striker that he wants. So until you have the right ingredients for kind of the way he wants to play, you're not going to see it. And it's going to be very much like what Pauly said. And he's going to have to come up with a game plan for the players that he does have available. And you've seen that. We just saw it with Bruno Fernandes that the minute that he was brought in, you started to see more of the attacking intent in Manchester United, and you started seeing us score more and more goals. At the end of the day, he didn't want Ighalo to be the backup striker. He wanted to have a mixture of Martial and Haaland. After he wasn't able to get him, he wanted to bring in Josh King, but he couldn't get him either. So he had to make do with Ighalo, and the way he's used them at the start was excellent because he used them in kind of moments that he needed someone to hold up the ball and kind of allow the other attacking players. The reason we see the likes of Pep, we see Jurgen Klopp and their team, we know how they're going to play is because they have those 11 players that they trust and they'll play them in every single game if they have to. You see something very similar with Bielsa. He trusts his players because he's seen them use the system and they're the style of players he wants in each position. I don't think Ollie has the style of player in each position that he's looking for. Hence the reason you're seeing us kind of be linked with so many different types of players. So you like, for example, the Cavani, Jovic, or you have the Dembele, Sancho, and then you saw us, like we said last year, where we were linked with Longstaff, where we've been linked with centre backs, where we've been linked with Alex Telles. I just don't think we have the style of players in certain key positions for his system for us to know what exactly he wants to do.
For me, a lot of that comes down to recruitment as well. If you have a director of football involved, you know exactly what style of play from top to bottom, from first team down to the youngest level of, I guess, age group at United, all playing the same uniform style of football. I think
ultimately Ollie Ball's what he wants it to look like is what we looked like after the restart. When he had his best 11 and you had Matic splitting those fullbacks and splitting the center backs, the fullbacks were getting up. You basically had Pogba and Bruno sitting in the middle with a front five of Shaw, Rashford, Martial, Greenwood, and Wan-Bissaka. And the team, Wan-Bissaka was getting assists. Shaw was getting forward, getting some good balls in the box that were turning into goals, and everything just looked right. I think that's his ultimate goal. It's just when you take one player out of that right now, it's all going kaput.
Coles, I'm going to give you the final word because these two have brought some brilliant points up. What is Ollie Ball, and what are you going to say to those people who say he has no tactics?
Well, I mean, the one criticism that I have, it's not exactly a criticism, it just develops over time, is that if Liverpool have got their final pass as a cutback into the final third for one of their narrow front three, and if Man City have got their final pass as the fullbacks or their wide players laying in a ball to the central channel and then scoring a goal, what exactly do United have as their final approach to scoring a goal? I mean, everyone can joke that it's probably a penalty, but it can't exactly be a penalty in the long term, and that's because it's pretty natural to get a penalty if you have players who travel at a fast pace and have got big momentum when they run so quick, and then they get a single to go down. But I still can't see what exactly is the final pass that we have that creates a free opening for us. City had, Liverpool had that, and Spurs had that at with Ericsson, especially in the 16-17 season. Bielsa's team at Leeds always has that. They had it in the Championship. But I can see the system that Ole wants to play. It's been pretty clear. But it's just the final pass that I'm worried about. It's almost like a final piece in the jigsaw that we often call it in a much cliched way. So that's one thing that I really want us to develop as time goes on.
That's a great way to end, and that's I agree. Look, there's a system in place. We know he knows what he wants to do, but for me, we're still relying on that individual brilliance. Too many times or penalties. But look, guys, what a fantastic show. To all the listeners, I hope you really enjoyed that. Let us know when we tweet this out a little bit later. We'll put all the links up. We have it on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. In the comments below, just let us know if you really enjoyed this, because this is the first time we're doing this show. I've got 3 fantastic guests, 3 really knowledgeable guests, and we will try and do this once a month. But if you guys really enjoyed it, then let us know, and we'll be doing it much more often with different teams. So thank you very much for listening today. Make sure you like and subscribe to Elite Football Show on YouTube, and also follow us on Twitter at @EFS_M Media. And we will see you in